This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is James Arnold Taylor, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi. I have a good feeling about this.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee. This is a huge plus for me and for listeners of Coffee with Kenobi. Back in 2013, August 2013, we booked the first guest ever for Coffee with Kenobi, and now he is back to talk about his brand new book, Star Wars: The Living Force. Of course, I'm talking about John Jackson Miller. John, welcome back. Your chair is a little dusty, but it's always ready for you. Welcome back to the show.
I'm glad to be here. I'm actually just back from Memphis, where I had both the book launch for the Kenobi book and where I listened to that Kenobi podcast along with my mother 10 years ago. Where she heard it and said, well, you must actually be something right now, because people are discussing you. But yeah, that was, unlike then, I came back with a convention cold. So I'm at the end of it. So if I sound like B. Arthur from the Star Wars Holiday Special, that is what's going on.
Hey, it just adds to the ambiance of everything.
There you go.
One of the things that I've always appreciated about you, besides your wonderful gift as a writer, is your massive comic book collection. Last time we talked, you had mentioned how many comic books you have. How is the comic book collection these days?
It is exactly where it was. I really have not been able to put as much time into it as I need to. One of the things that happens with comic book bags is after a certain number of years, they deteriorate, and you have to change them all. And I just haven't gotten around to changing them all yet, but then I don't have a whole lot of stuff that is exactly super valuable. I just like to have it there for reference and to actually, occasionally read if that's possible. But no, I visit there and I have a nonfiction book about comics history that I will eventually be getting out. I ended up having to pause it for several projects, and it is something I will return to, just as soon as I get back to it.
I'm looking forward to that. You'll appreciate this. I'm working on my second master's degree, and right now I'm taking a class on comic books and graphic novels. Just finished a paper on Watchmen and really studying Scott McCloud's books. And
oh wow,
boy, just fabulous stuff.
There were not courses like these when I was in college. I would have taken them.
Oh, I know. You could teach them, I would say. Well, let's talk about your book. Talk about how Star Wars: The Living Force came to be, as far as the impetus for it.
It was the case that I did the New Dawn novel in 2014, and following that, it was fairly clear that the tempo of Star Wars novels was going to be slowing down significantly because they weren't going to be doing the mass market paperback only releases. That was how I had gotten in with the Knight Errant book. Those had already stopped, and they were having to concern themselves with what was going to be coming up in the sequel trilogy, and just the tempo slowed down a bit. So I was fortunate that through my connections, and one of the connections was that Jennifer Heddle, the fiction editor at Lucasfilm, had mentioned me to Ed Schlesinger, who is her former coworker at Simon & Schuster, where they did Star Trek. I was able to supplement the novel writing part of my work with Star Trek novels. I ended up doing 8 over the next several years. But in between, the idea always was that I would keep my passport stamped and I would still do things for Star Wars. And I did. Tom Holler, my editor at Star Wars, and Elizabeth Schaefer would, pitch me assignments. I did short stories for Ray Sloan, short stories for the Certain Point of View books, for the Rise of the Empire, and then I did the novella for Canto Bight, and I even did a comic for IDW for the Star Wars Adventures. But it was always just a question of what would the right project be. And as Kenobi approached the TV show, it was one of those things where it's really difficult to write anything connected to a TV show that's about to come out. We've all seen that. And so it was not clear, when anything would happen. And then it happened all at once. Tom let me know, okay, there may be something, and it might be sooner rather than later. And literally the day that my most recent Star Trek novel came out, I was on my way to the book launch party, which is the same store in Madison, Wisconsin, that's having the book launch party for Living Force on May 13th. April 13th, sorry. He said, would you like to write a book about the Jedi Council? And set a year before Phantom Menace. And I said, one, yes. And then two, I'd like to do it if I could have Qui-Gon walk into the Jedi Council and call them out and say, okay, you guys got to get out of this room. You are in the ivory tower here. There's towers all around you. Who knows which tower you're in at any one moment. You got to actually get out and see the people of the galaxy, see why the conditions for the fall of the Republic are ripe, see why the Jedi aren't as respected as you think they are. And it went from there. And so by the end of the year, we had a book.
Wow. Well, you've played in the sandbox many times, but particularly this era. What makes this era of Star Wars so compelling for you?
It is the end of a cycle. It is exactly where the High Republic begins and ends. That's up to them and the people working on that part of the franchise. But very clearly, everybody remembers that era. We have many Jedi counselors that were active in that era, and they would see the difference between what's going on then and what's going on in the days leading up to the Phantom Menace and the problem with the Separatists. They would see that there are these undercurrents happening, and they would see that the Republic has become more corrupt. It has become more fixated on parochial interests, on commercial interests, and I wanted to show that the Jedi were getting sort of roped into that, whether they wanted to be or not.
Which, and boy, we're not going to spoil anything about the book, but it sure is rich. It's gonna foster a lot of great conversation, I think. But I think this next Jedi we're going to talk about, he fosters a lot of interesting conversation. We'll look at some of these Jedi individually. What is interesting to you about Mace Windu, and what did you learn about him while writing this book?
Well, Mace is sort of the the face of the council. He's there to be sort of the representative that speaks in sentences that aren't half backward, like Yoda does. He's there to also sort of protect the traditions of the council as well, because he's mindful of what has come before. And I wanted to try to do a couple of things with him. First of all, I wanted to show that he was not made of stone, that he had this connection with Deepa B'Elaba, his Padawan, who is now on the council, and how he was handling that connection now that they were both colleagues. And of course, you're not supposed to really be into connections as Jedi, but there's people are friends. This is a family. This is a working group. So you have that dynamic going on. And so, there are disputes that almost sound like family arguments that take place that he's part of. I wanted him to also be the one who actually says, let's go. All right, Qui-Gon, you've issued this challenge. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see, and we'll see your idea, and we'll raise it a road trip. We'll all go, because I think that he has confidence that the council can meet these expectations above and beyond what they already are putting on themselves. And then he is part of, in his own arc in this story, a thing that I really love doing. And this goes back to my Knights of the Old Republic days, where I have been, sort of exploring the twisted, complicated, convoluted relationship between not just the Republic and the Jedi, but the Republic Navy and the Jedi, and how this notion of these free security officers who just come in and take over every so often may not be the best deal for the Republic, and certainly the line officers. I figured that there was nobody in Star Wars that I could have more representing the Jedi as a unit, as a organization than Mace. And I figured there was nobody I could come up with in Star Wars that would represent the position of the line officer better than Pel Bailu. Pel was a character that I had created already for a short story I did that was a prequel to the New Dawn, and I wanted to have them just go at it for a good chunk of the book, where they kind of explore, what is this relationship going to be? Because again, this is not just about relationships between people in this book. It's also about relationships between institutions.
Right. I love that answer. And that's one thing I remember even from the beginning, how much food for thought you give us. And the reason I ask about Mace, and we'll talk about some of the other characters too, is that I've always told my students that there are two really good ways to learn something. It's either to write about it or to teach it. And in many ways, you're kind of doing both, because it is important. If Mace is always made of stone,
yeah,
then why would we care about him? But you through these different levels of rhetoric and discourse he has, I think it helps a lot.
Yeah, I do. And again, I grew more sympathetic to the council, various members of the council, as I wrote the book myself, because certainly with all the books that I've written where the council has been led astray or has, absolutely, Knights of the Old Republic. I mean, come on, that was the council more or less betraying or turning its back on an innocent person. I wanted to, take their side a little bit and see what they thought.
I love that. Well, then let's transition over to Yoda. Yoda, of course, is probably the most well-known member of the Jedi Council. I think just for general audiences, you don't even have to be a Star Wars fan to know who Yoda is. I feel like he'd be more complicated in many ways because, a good book teaches us about a character. What did you learn? And I think The Living Force does that. What did you learn about Yoda through walking in his footsteps?
Well, he's been there a long time, and this is a thing that I think is similar to the other long-lived characters that are on the council. Oppo, Urail, Yaddle. To an extent, they've seen a lot. They're the institutional memory to a degree. They don't necessarily, though, want to make that mean. They're the defenders of the old, that they're conservative. They never will change. And Yoda in particular, I think, is the most cautious about that. He and Yaddle both, I think, are both willing to try to interact with individuals out of the larger scheme of things when they can. It's just they by virtue of the seats that they inhabit in the council, they also have to worry about the bigger issues and the bigger things. But you can kind of see, that Yoda is in this book, when we put him in this planet Quinn, in a garden setting, talking to somebody, counseling them. He's not that far from Dagobah. He's not that far from a one-on-one interaction with somebody. He just doesn't get a lot of that. And you see that all these people kind of miss that.
Interesting. Very interesting. You're adding a lot of nice little cookie crumbs for everybody to follow along when they're reading the book. The first person you mentioned was Qui-Gon Jinn, who kicks off. I mean, he literally not literally, but he's the first page. Boom, we see Qui-Gon Jinn right away, and he's one, I think, that we only got one movie from him. Of course, we got just a smattering of him in Kenobi and a little bit in some of the animated stuff. But Qui-Gon Jinn, I think, is a welcome character, and how fun that you got to talk about him and write about him. What did you learn about Qui-Gon Jinn through this process?
Because we don't get a lot of him. He's kind of a vessel that we can invest our, what we would like to see the Jedi do or how they would behave. I felt like he would be the polar opposite of the institutionalists in terms of, he's not the guy who's all about, well, let's sit here worrying about, what's going to happen, what the repercussions of this are 2,000 years in the future or on the other end of the galaxy or whatever. I think that the balance, and this is not to speak of the balance of the Force with regard to the prophecy, but the balance he speaks of in this book is more about a balance in the personal lives of all of the Jedi Masters, their professional lives. He's actually somebody who is attuned to the living Force, and I was so happy when we got that name for the book. It was, as soon as I realized it was available, it had only been used before for the living Force. They did a role-playing game campaign for the Wizards of the Coast Saga edition at one point, and there was a little fiction written for it. In fact, co-written by one of my friends from college. But that's but never a novel. And I'm like, okay, this is what this book is about. This is what Qui-Gon is about. Qui-Gon is about getting these folks to tie in, to tune in to what's around them, and again, that's supposed to be part of the Force anyway. But I really wanted him to sort of be that person who says, okay, yeah, I'm the one who's not on the council on purpose, and you wouldn't have wanted me there anyway, even though you said you did, and you could see that he is sort of this he's his own person going his own way.
Absolutely, and that's part of the appeal of him. Now, those Jedi were arguably the most well-known, but what about some of the other members of the council during this period? You got to breathe a lot of life into them. Who did you learn to appreciate even more after writing The Living Force?
There are a number of characters that they didn't have a lot written about, and I was able to flesh them out some. Of the ones that didn't have much about them yet, I would say Eth Koth is one where I decided, okay, this is going to be somebody who is just very, very deliberately, intensely focused on his work, and distracting him from that situation is going to take him fish out of water. He's going to try to recreate his problems on Coruscant wherever he goes, and I had to sort of kickstart him out on his way. Then we have characters like Plo Koon and Saesee. I was thinking that Plo would be just really dry as a character, and maybe not that much fun. And then I realized, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pair him up with Saesee Tiin, who is sort of the the gearhead, I guess, member of the council. And I took from what little there was of him enough to say, okay, this guy is gruff. His motto is competence is not enough. He's somebody who next to Plo, Plo looks easygoing and calm. And so I have a lot of situations like that where your Rail Poof and Ki-Adi-Mundi together are fun because one of them is just much more structured than the other, and so I tried to find something interesting with each of them. Adi Gallia is basically Yoda's right hand, who has been crushed by the bureaucracy. I wanted to find something interesting to do with everybody. I wanted Yaddle to counsel people individually. I wanted Evan Peel to basically be running a bunch of runaways, more or less, and so it all sort of sprang from there.
Oh, how fun! How fun! It's great to be able to see these characters you just see in the Phantom Menace very briefly, and actually see them spring to life. But if you're going to have heroes, you naturally have to have some sort of antagonist or villain. So let's talk about the antagonist in Living Force. Without giving away spoilers, what can you share about some of the pirates and villains in the book?
Well, Zalastra is our main figure here, and what I wanted to do, it's actually no coincidence that I had just been writing a graphic novel for the new Ubisoft game Skull and Bones, and that graphic novel came out last month when the game did, and that all allowed me to sort of explore stories of pirates and how they lived and what they wanted. And I gave her a particular a goal and a particular motivation against the Jedi. But what I wanted to do was sort of show how in the vacuum of power, with the Jedi pulling back from various trade routes because the Republic was pulling business, and the Senate was shifting things places, and also because the Emperor is doing what the Emperor is doing, the future Emperor. I wanted to show that nature abhors a vacuum, and people will fill in to try to take power in places and take advantage of the lack of supervision and the lack of Jedi presence. And all of this, it all ends up showing how important the Jedi still are, and showing how important a Republic Navy would be, which they don't have. I wanted to show, what life would be like if you were on that, outside part of things. There are multiple different factions, and they are all battling with one another. And in a sense, that drew back on my old book Knight Errant, where it was all the different Sith Lords, where it was just lots of different organizations and with colorful personalities atop each one. And then I wanted this chess master in charge, and that gives us the Zalastra.
And I think one of your strengths is always writing about these characters, whether they are heroes or villains, who are on the outskirts or the traditions of what the archetypes are, and sort of fleshing that out. That, to me, that's some of my favorite things that you do.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, and speaking of that, it's not a question so much. We talked about the beginning of the show, but the book Kenobi will always have a special place in my heart. It was part of where Coffee with Kenobi started, which is so apt. But to this day, it's still one of my favorite Star Wars stories in any medium. So thank you again for writing that awesome book.
I appreciate that. It is my best known book. I think right now it is probably just past New Dawn for the number of copies that are out there. New Dawn got a boost because it had the Rise of the Empire collection. But then Kenobi has now gotten all these other boosts from Tales of Kenobi, the Barnes and Noble collection, and now we have just announced that there is a hardcover coming with sprayed orange edges from Inkstone that people are able to start pre-ordering from Inkstone Books in England. They do ship overseas. And you know, and again, it's also just in multiple languages now and other places. So it's probably by far the more famous of the books. You know, I never anticipated any kind of a future like that for the book. You know, again, it was you know, the night it came out, I'm listening to your podcast, and as I said, my mother was like, "Okay, this is actually something here. You might actually be onto something." I appreciate the you know, patience that many readers almost certainly had to approach that book with, because it was not anything like they were probably expecting. You know, it is a book without lightsaber fights. It is a book without space battles. There is no Sith presence that shows up. It's an arrival story. It's a story about a man in pain who thinks everybody that he ever cared about is dead, and that he killed his best friend. You know, it's also a story about the people of you know, the desert, and the people that he meets, and how he changes their lives, and changes their lives for the better in one case, how he, you know, creates justice for another, and so yeah, I'm happy with how it turned out. That's a book where I wouldn't change a word of it. I can't say that about everything I've ever done, but I can say that about that.
Well, that says a lot, and I still maintain, for as great as Jon Favreau was with a lot of things he did in the Mandalorian verse, so to speak, I still maintain that you are the first person to fully put a stamp on the Tuskens and make me think about them as not savages, but real characters, real people, and I will always be grateful for that.
Well, I have to give credit where it's due. I am standing on the shoulders of the previous people that had done work. So yeah, Tim Truman, who had done the Outlander storyline, that gave us you know, the first Jedi who had gone to live with the Tuskens, yeah, so I have to say that, you know, I developed upon that, you know, things about the twin sons religion, that sort of thing, that went from there. But then I got to do a really deep dive into it, and so and again, I'm happy that we got the chance to do that.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is
Yeah, it was great fun. It's always great fun when I see your name attached to anything. And so what can you share that we can look forward to in the future? I mean, of course, Star Wars Living Force, I believe, published on April 9th, so we're not that far away. Very, very excited for people to get a chance to read that.
Okay, so Living Force is hardcover audiobook and ebook on April 9th. If people have not submitted their receipts yet to readstarwars.com/pre-order the Living Force. That is something that people can do until April 16th to get a free book plate if they're in the United States or Canada and over the age of 18. Also out in April, we've got out the trade paperback edition of my most recent Star Trek novel, Strange New Worlds: The High Country. In May, we have two releases from Marvel, which are the Epic Collection for Knights of the Old Republic, Volume 1, that is back in print after 9 years. That's the first third of the Knights of the Old Republic comics. It's a book that is very valuable because it's out of print, and now it'll be back out there. And also there is a omnibus coming out for Star Wars, Star Wars Legends. I think it's the Rebellion, Volume 2. That has my very first Star Wars story from Dark Horse in it. Model Officer from Star Wars Empire 35. That also comes out in May. In June, we have a trade paperback edition of A New Dawn coming out. That's one of we're beginning to move all of the a number of the books into trade paperback form, as folks have seen. I've already got out the special essential edition of Knight Errant, which came out in February, and so people are finally able to read Knight Errant, both the comics and the novel, because that's still in print from Marvel. And then I have another major project, which is announcing probably in between this recording and this broadcast, and I'm not able to mention it.
Excellent. We will certainly look forward to that, and I will obviously be looking forward to the next time I get to chat with you. Thanks again, John, for coming back on the show.
Appreciate it, Dan.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.